Our dominant eye relays information to the brain faster and more accurately than our non-dominant eye. And this can have an impact in sports. It's been shown to influence our ground strokes in tennis, shooting mechanics in basketball, and putting alignment in golf. And when we consider eye dominance together with hand dominance, a million-dollar question comes up. Is there an ideal combination? Or for some athletes, it's a multi-million-dollar question. Do I have it? In other words, is it better to be congruent and have both on the same side, like someone who is right hand dominant and right eye dominant, or left hand dominant and left eye dominant? Or is it preferable to be cross dominant and have your hand and eye dominance on opposite sides? The short answer is, it depends on the particular sport and potentially on the position that you play in your sport. But in terms of pure visual reaction time, there is one combination that has a clear advantage. Let's see what the studies show. This 2022 systematic review looked at 14 hand-eye laterality studies that had been done in a variety of sports: baseball, basketball, soccer, golf, tennis, cricket, archery, and biathlon, to name a few. Only 2 studies showed a direct effect of hand-eye pairings, with direct effect meaning that there was a difference in a measure related to performance. These were found in archery and biathlon, where individuals with a congruent, uncrossed hand-eye pattern demonstrated better shooting accuracy, which was attributed to having the rifle or bow on the same side as the sighting eye when aiming at a target. For indirect effects, which refers to associations rather than specific performance measures, 2 studies showed a higher prevalence of cross-dominant athletes in golf and baseball compared to the percentage in the normal population, and 2 studies showed a higher percentage of cross-dominance at the elite level of soccer and tennis compared to regular groups of athletes in these sports. If you think about a sport like baseball, it makes intuitive sense that a cross-dominant pattern would be advantageous for batting. So for a right-handed batter, the batting stance positions the left eye closer to the pitcher, which is optimal to detect the oncoming ball. And the same is true for a left-handed, right-eye dominant batter. And although this study confirmed a higher percentage of cross-dominant players on a collegiate baseball team compared to the general population, the batters who were cross-eye hand dominant were only slightly more successful than those with an uncrossed pattern. And pitchers who had congruent, same-sided hand-eye dominance were significantly more successful than those who were crossed. Interestingly, this team also had a substantially higher percentage of players with central ocular dominance compared to population estimates. Like being ambidextrous, these guys were ambiocular, and this group was found to be the most successful for both pitching and batting. So like I mentioned in the beginning, the hand-eye advantage may depend on the sport and the position you play in a particular sport. Or it's possible that versatility is the main thing that matters. But let's for a moment take eye dominance out of the equation and consider hand dominance by itself. Approximately 90% of humans show a right-hand preference, and based on archaeological evidence, this percentage is thought to be historically stable. And yet, despite making up only 10% of the population, left-handers have consistently occupied disproportionate numbers in the upper echelons of several sports. This study looked at the top 100 ranked athletes in several sports between the years 2009 and 2014. If red represents right-handers and lime green is lefties in the normal population, we see 10 out of 100 lefties. In table tennis, there were 19 women in the top 100 and 25 for the top men. In terms of cricket bowlers, 22 were left-handed, and Major League Baseball pitchers, 30 were left-handed. One explanation for this higher prevalence of lefties is what's referred to as the fighting hypothesis. Here's the theory. Because left-handed males are substantially fewer in number, right-handed men have less experience and thus less success fighting them. On the other hand, literally, left-handed males have no trouble fighting right-handed males because that's primarily what they're used to seeing. And from an evolutionary standpoint, fighting has been a key component of sexual selection for human males. And it's thought that the reason left-handedness did not die out as a human trait is because of this selective advantage in fighting. As an inherited trait, left-handedness then gets passed on to females as a byproduct. And this left-handed advantage isn't confined to humans. Here's evidence that left-handed coiled snails are better able to withstand attacks from right-handed crabs. So there's that. In academic journals, it's referred to as a negative perceptual frequency advantage, which basically means our perceptual system encounters left-handers' movement patterns less often, So they have an edge because we can't rely on the anticipatory visual clues that we're most accustomed to seeing. And this holds true when lefties compete against other lefties. Several studies have shown that left-handed subjects are better able to predict shots coming from right-handed players because they also have this relative difference in experience. But apart from just being a rarity, there's a second potential explanation for why left-handed people are more successful in sports. Pop a Prozac, my right-handed friends, because this is something that we'll be reluctant to concede, and that is maybe lefties are actually a little better, or at least faster, particularly in interceptive sports that require hand-eye coordination. The main goal of this article was to evaluate the changes in visual reaction time with aging related to demographic and health factors like education, gender, smoking, diabetes, dementia, etc. I may cover it in another video, except the results are super depressing for any of us over 40. But at any rate, one parameter they looked at was the relationship between handedness and reaction time. In this study, with over 75,000 subjects, they found that the average simple visual reaction time was faster in left-handed subjects compared to those who are right-handed. And this was especially true for the subjects between the ages of 20 and 40, but the difference disappeared for subjects 50 and older. But nevertheless, this supports a number of other studies that have shown faster reaction times in left-handed individuals. And the mechanism for this, that was speculated for decades and now has increasing support from EEG and functional MRI studies, is due to the specialization of the two brain hemispheres. Specifically, for most people, the left hemisphere of our brain processes speech and language, and the right side manages spatial information, like locating a moving ball. Most people are aware that each motor cortex controls the opposite side limbs. So when I wave my left hand or kick my left foot, those impulses originated in the right motor cortex. When it comes to visuomotor reaction time, which couples visual perception, seeing and locating a ball, with action, making a directed movement, the response is faster if the information only needs to be processed on one side of the brain or one hemisphere. This is a ridiculously simplified illustration, but here it is. If the area for spatial attention, which we use to locate the position of an object, is primarily housed in the right hemisphere, then a motor response will be faster for a left-handed person because the spatial information stays in the same hemisphere, it's transferred to the right motor cortex, which then sends a signal to move the left hand. For a right-handed person, the spatial information has to cross over from the right hemisphere to the left motor cortex to initiate right-handed movement. And this interhemispheric transfer takes time. It's on the order of milliseconds, but it's enough to have made a measurable difference in several studies that have looked at hand dominance and reaction time. Now let's bring eye dominance back into the conversation and talk about a study that looked at this brain processing pattern in different combinations of hand and eye dominance. The title's a spoiler, so I'll give it to you after I summarize it. The study had 293 participants ranging in age from 18 to 57 with an average age of 25. The group was evenly distributed between men and women and left and right hand dominance. They were divided into one of 6 groups based on being either left or right eye dominant and strongly left-handed, strongly right-handed, or mixed-handed based on tests that quantify the strength of handedness. Interestingly, they did not have subjects that tested as having mixed or central ocular dominance. The subjects performed a visually guided eye movement task while undergoing a functional MRI scan, which effectively highlights the areas of the brain that are active during the test. The subjects were instructed to fixate on a crosshair image at the center of the screen and then move their eyes toward a white dot that jumped randomly for 16 seconds along a horizontal axis. There are 2 pathways for visual information processing: an upper or dorsal network that aids in object location and guides vision for action and spatial localization, and a lower or ventral network that provides vision for perception. Both hemispheres were highly activated for all subjects during the testing, but the researchers calculated the asymmetry in activity, which side of the brain was more strongly weighted during the visual perception task. With gray bars representing the right hemisphere and white representing the left hemisphere on the histogram, the researchers found that the ventral networks were asymmetric toward the right for all subject groups. In the dorsal pathway, when looking at this region, which represents an interface between the perceptive and motor systems, so the area that links the location of an object detected by the eye with the activation of hand motion, The largest asymmetries in this area are in the individuals who are strongly left-handed and right eye dominant, and this shows an asymmetry toward the right hemisphere. The mixed-handed subjects had relatively balanced hemispheric lateralization, and the strongly right-handed group also tended to be even or even slightly asymmetric toward the left hemisphere, but this was not statistically significant. The key point is the largest asymmetry, which reached statistical significance, was in the left-hand, right eye cross-dominant subject group. What does this mean? Lefties, for the most part, are quick. Lefties with right eye dominance are super quick. So if we look again at our simplistic animation of perceptual flow, visual information from each eye is transmitted to both hemispheres, but it's thought that dominant eye input primarily registers on the ipsilateral or same side of the occipital cortex of the brain. So using the example of a cross-dominant lefty, the visual information detected by the right eye is sent to the right occipital cortex, then distributed along the dorsal and ventral pathways asymmetrically weighted toward the right hemisphere, then to the right motor cortex, which initiates left-handed movement. Boom, 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 boom. For anyone who has congruent, same-sided hand-eye dominance, information will have to cross over at least once from the dominant eye to the opposite motor cortex, like we saw earlier, and potentially more than once depending on eye dominance and the hemisphere handling the bulk of spatial information, which appears to be more variable in right-handed individuals. Keep in mind, this is a super simplified explanation, and the histogram is a summary of the fMRI data for the entire groups. So for any given individual, there may be different combinations of hemispheric activation. And a big limitation of this study is that they're only showing the perception side of the perception-action cycle. They didn't actually test initiation of movement to confirm that the right-eyed left-handers' reaction times were faster, which would have been a super powerful addition to this study. Despite that, here's the title of the study: An Evolutionary Advantage. In the conclusion of the article, the authors recap the process. The functional connection between visual input and motor output would involve only one hemisphere for subjects presenting crossed hand-eye laterality. It does not require interhemispheric transfer. So in the case of strongly left-handed right-eye subjects, it corresponds to the right hemisphere dominant for spatial attention through the dorsal network. And they conclude, we believe that this phenomenon explains why left-handed, right-siding dominant eye athletes can outperform their competitors. So there it is, in black and white, highlighted in purple. To summarize what we've covered today, there are two reasons lefties have an advantage in interactive sports. First, the fighting hypothesis. They're less common, so competitors have less experience and less success facing them. And number two, they're hardwired in a way that the transfer of information from visual perception to motor action is more efficiently carried out on one side of the brain, especially if they are right eye dominant. So now I've successfully increased the competition for all the left-handed right eye dominant pickleball partners I've been pestering to pair with me. Not smart. But in an upcoming video, we'll actually talk about how having the fastest reaction time may not be the most important thing for expert performance. So stay tuned. In the meantime, if you haven't already checked out this video on how eye dominance affects our strokes, footwork, court coverage, and partner preference, take a look. Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon.